I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jeannie, and thank you for every single one of the people in the departments that have helped keep our city clean, our streets plowed.
Yep, it's been a hard and long winter, but well deserved for our water situation. So
Yes. Thank you.
Not over yet.
not over yet,
Yeah, we're not over yet.
but you know, thank you in between is not a bad
First day
idea.
of spring, yeah, first day of spring. So.
There's light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Maybe we could be skiing in July. Come on.
Until it starts snowing again.
Next is the acceptance of our minutes for our last meeting and also the approval for our agenda for tonight.
Well, I haven't done it for a while, so I'll make a motion that we accept the agenda and minutes.
I'll second.
It's being moved and seconded. We'll take roll call for this. Amy?
Aye.
Tom?
All right.
Mark?
Aye.
Jeannie?
Aye.
Aye. As a reminder for everyone that is tuning in or that is here, our regular meetings for City Council are the first and the third Tuesday of every month at 5:30, and our next one will be on April 4th. There is a couple of exceptions, I guess, on sometime during the summer, usually July, when we may vote to only hold one meeting, and also in December. Now is the time for anybody in the public who wishes to address the council or the mayor. If you'd like to share any concerns on issues that are not on the agenda for tonight, please come up to the mic and state your name and your place of residence and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. All right, I think we can keep going. Next on our agenda are reports from the mayor and staff.
Well, we have asked Paul Linhart to give us an update on any prediction. I won't make you do predictions, but maybe some updates on spring runoff and what we are doing to be prepared for an unusually wet year.
I want a prediction. Doesn't have to be right. That could be a prediction.
I'm not sure how to turn on the projector. Hopefully someone can hear it and do it.
Jeremy's in the back.
I can see you doing something.
Guess some matches.
So, for the council, mayor has handed out these slides that we'll be seeing soon. Hopefully we have a better view of them.
Right, the council can see one up here. It's
Yeah,
just the
it's
folks in
pretty
the
small
audience.
text.
We'll try and get that one on.
Do the people viewing on the television, can they see that or this, or how is that projection?
I assume they'll see
They
that.
probably can only see this one.
But it's not a portion of their screen, it's something they see directly.
There we go. There it is. Thanks,
Yeah.
Jeremy.
Yep, we got it. So, and I don't profess to be an expert on any of these subjects, but I've got a lot of data. So hopefully it's an update. I'll try to move through it. You've got several graphs in front of you. I was going to just give you an update on, and hopefully a conclusion to plowing for this winter season. We'll probably find out tomorrow and tomorrow night.
We were so glad that March 15th, we talked about moving it back to the end of February. I was really glad we didn't for parking.
So these graphs, the first one is, it says call outs at the top. Call out meaning we dispatch snowplows for a storm. You've got 3 years of data for all of these topics, left to right being 2020, 2021, and 2022 current season. Typically, we are in the 12 to 25 call-outs in a year. You can see we went 12, then 20, and this season we've had 40 snowplow events. I thought the next little graph on that same chart was interesting. It's a snow total for the year. The last 3 years successfully have been 37, 46, and this year we're at 75 so far. That's in Logan.
75 inches.
Inches, yeah, thank you. That's just total snow received in Logan. The next graph is tons of salt we've used on the roads. We're typically in that 2,000 to 3,000 range. We went 1,000, 3,200, and this year we are just shy of 5,500 tons of salt we put on the road. Total cost. This is, again, we haven't finalized the year out completely, and there will be a reimbursement for this year because we help the airport and they do reimburse that cost, so that's not in here yet. But we're typically around $200,000, a little north of it sometimes. 3 years ago it was, where am I? $170,000. Last year was $230,000, and this year we're just shy of $440,000.
Oh, what did we budget for this?
You can't budget for this.
I'm just wondering.
And it's hard because that number is not one budget number. That includes our salt materials, that includes equipment, which isn't necessarily a budget number, and labor and time. So I don't have a single budget line item to compare to that.
So the total number of money, that's labor and products?
Yep, labor, equipment, material. It's all of those. The salt I can tell you we typically budget, I don't have that number on here, so I was going to compare salt cost with budgeted salt, but I don't have it on here. And then the last one, which I really wanted to highlight, and probably the one I'm most proud of, is we should become more efficient if we do something more, I guess. But we've tried the last couple of years to tweak the hours we plow, how we do it, how quickly we dispatch after it starts snowing. All of these things could lead to a decreased level of service. We've tried to maintain the same level of service on the roads with black asphalt as quick as we can get it. But we've gone from about $12,500 per event or per call out, and this year we were almost down to $10,000 per call out. We've changed how we mix our salt. We use a red and a white. One's more expensive, but it works at a lower temperature and it sustains longer on the road. We've tried to mix those differently to stretch those dollars, but there's an update on snow plowing. A few interesting numbers. Our first call out this year was November 10th. It was a small storm. We just put 4 plows out. Since that date, we've had 40 call outs, as I said. That means our crews have done a plowing event every 3 days since November 10th, on average. Just to put it in perspective.
I think they've done a great job, but there's only one day that I think I felt where the snowplows. The rest of the time, they were way ahead of schedule. You know, they're doing a great job.
Good. 1 out of 40 is not bad.
It was probably coming down so hard, they were going as fast as they could. But.
In a typical year, we'll see 2 to 4, 2 to 5 storms that are over 3 inches. This year we've had 10. And the average annual snowfall in Logan is 55 inches compared to what we've received.
75.
There's some snowfall updates. This next one, there's a lot of lines on here. I apologize. I tend to put too much information. This is snowpack specific to Tony Grove, Snowtail site at Tony Grove. If you start at the bottom and work your way up, the red line on the bottom, the lowest graph, is 1996. I'm not sure why you have that year on there. So we'll keep going. Oh, I thought that's 1984, which was a high considered large water year. The rounded one, the next one is an average. That's our average snowpack at Tony Grove for the year. Then you work your way up to last year is right, excuse me, I got those backwards. Below the average is last year, above the average is 84. The next one is kind of a blue color is 2017, and the highest one that's yellow is 2011. Gives you an idea on our high years. It's really hard to see, but there's a green line going up that ends next to 2017. That's the current year. I don't know if I can, right there. That's where we are currently, on that green line.
Oh, we're just, because we're only to 3-1,
Correct.
so.
And
But
so,
that's interesting, because the snowpack,
Shows how much we get in April.
yeah, the snowpack increases remarkably.
it typically peaks after that first week of April. And what this shows to me is right now we are very close to 2017 on our snowpack at Tony Grove. If we continue receiving it, it would not be hard to catch up to 2011. But if we stayed cold and had average precipitation, we'd probably mirror 2017. Some data on that. Our percent median, if we compare this date with the average on this date, we're 144%.
Right.
If you compare this date, what we have now, to the annual snow received, we're 133. If we didn't get any more snow this year, we'd be at 133%.
And we're one of the lowest in the state.
We are. The Bear River range overall is 154, and the state is more like 180.
Yep.
Southwest Utah right now is 251%.
I was going to say, I thought it was 220, so it's 251.
250
water.
Yeah.
One year. Get that big snow again.
So that's where we're at currently on the snowpack. I don't want to make any predictions, but that's where we are. There's a lot of snow, is the short of that. This graph shows Logan River water flows. I put that on there because there's 3 years. 2021 is the lowest orange line. That's a low water year. The river didn't even make it to about 350 to 400 CFS at its peak in that year. The next two graph lines, the dotted red line is 2011, which was our highest snowpack year at Tony Grove, and the green line is 2017, the next highest year. And what I was hoping to highlight is how differently those two highest snowpack years came down the river. It was all a function of how much it warms up, how quickly, and then how cool it stays at night. 2017 was fairly friendly. We got a pretty high peak in March, stayed fairly high, but not too high. April it went up, May it went up, and that year the highest, we had 1,400 CFS coming down the river, and the river gauge at First Dam was 5.0 feet. That's the river gauge at First Dam at its highest point in 2017. Flood stage on the Logan River is 5.2, to give you an idea. So 2017 was a flood year, but it came down as, I think, friendly as it could have, if you will. 2011, on the other hand, stayed cold for a long time. The river stayed down, and then all of a sudden, the end of May, it went up really high. And it got up to 5.4 on the river gauge and 1,700 CFS. So there's a lot of snow, but it still could come down in a nice way, if we're lucky.
A nice way.
One thing that's interesting, the river almost always peaks between May 25th and June 10th. That's almost always the river peak, and the peak is almost always 10 to 12 days long, regardless of snowpack or year.
Except for 2011.
It was a little bit later.
Yeah.
It peaked about June 15th to the 20th.
Well, it's still sort of like, yeah, probably the 15th, according to the graph.
So that is the Logan River. That was my last slide, some data to give you an idea of what we've done this year. Working with Craig Humphreys is our emergency manager for the city. We've met with him regularly. We as a city, there's really two things of concern. Number one is local sheet flow. As snow in your backyard melts, is it going to make it into your window well? Very localized type flooding, and that's the concern right now, especially as you get rain. Thus far, it's been, in my opinion, as good as it could have been. We've had rain, there was some concern, but I haven't heard of any major flooding. I know there's been some homes that have had issues. The second is when the higher elevation comes down the river, again, middle May to middle of June is when we'll see that. We have walked the entire river, removed any current branches, snags, those kinds of things. We do that every spring, but we have done it this year. It was very minimal, thankfully. Our crews for the local snow are just, we have areas where certain catch basins or storm drains may have issues with ponding. We're monitoring those regularly. City employees, every department contributed time to help fill sandbags. We have filled 15,000 sandbags as a staff. We have those stockpiled. The goal with that is if there is an emergency, we'd rather be working on the emergency, not filling sandbags in that moment. Our highest year, according to folklore, I heard we filled 43,000 sandbags in either 11 or 17, to give you an idea of when we responded to that. We do have a total of approximately 55,000 unfilled sandbags in our reserves.
So Paul, do you think since 2011 and 2017, have we done any mitigation efforts that will help the peak flow move into the Bear River and, beyond?
Yes. I wouldn't say on the entire Logan River, but especially from Main Street west. We did all that work around Rendezvous Park,
Right.
the golf course. We've done a lot of cleanup between 6th West and 10th West, and then west of 10th. There have been some improvements through call it residential, east of Main Street. They're very localized, not necessarily large reaches of the river, but there's definitely been that, and also just lessons learned in management. It really has a lot to do with, in that residential area, how residents manage their backyard and what they do with the riverbank and those sort of things. So there has been some. I'm not excited for flood, but I'm excited to see if those things were beneficial or not.
So in the Black Hawk Country Manor area, if you recall, I mean, that was federal
Yeah.
funding that we got to actually purchase some homes. I mean, we created some berms. I mean, there was substantial investment in that area because that had been an ongoing problem area, so.
That's pretty well stocked.
Well, we'll see. We haven't had
Yeah, and that's on the Blacksmith Fort, but there's a lot of effort in there.
That's true.
But yeah.
How about storm sewers, waterways? I see areas where they get plugged, there's cardboard or plywood sitting on. Did you say earlier that we have checked those? Or do we need to check?
You mean storm drain?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. As local residents, that's very helpful. If you see leaves or garbage on a storm drain, just
Pull it out.
move it out of the way, get rid of it. We have crews that go around regularly and clean storm drains.
Okay.
And again, the last time we had a big flood event, we had the lagoons, the sewer lagoons that we were using. So now we have a $150 million treatment plant. One reason we were able to get the cost down on that is we still do utilize the lagoons if there's a big water storm event, so we can put water there and store it and then process it slowly. And again, we're kind of preparing just in case there's any problem with the headworks, but there are, again, we've created several different ways to handle all the increased flow that could come in to the sewer headworks. And also they're preparing some sandbags there just in case, so
Good.
trying to be prepared.
After 2017, we tried to do some publicity, especially with sump pumps, those things like that. They shouldn't go into the sanitary sewer system. They can really overwhelm our pumping stations. That's one of the biggest problems we get with rain on frozen ground, is a lot of inflow into the actual sewer system. That's one thing that we don't think about very often, but we worry about in these early spring rainstorms. One of the facts, we set up the resident sandbag filling area at the library. As of today, we've had 185 people come and get sandbags. I think 2 of them did not take 10 sandbags. So we're at about 1,850 sandbags that we've given out of that area.
That they filled themselves.
Correct. On the first day, it was quite busy, and we did have some crew out helping, just keep up with it, but that's where it's at today.
It's dropped a little bit.
All right, any additional questions before we let Paul go?
Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you. We appreciate your help. And again, the fire department with their emergency management, Craig Humphreys is, again, he's coordinating with the county and the state, so we have good resources. Again, the governor's pledge, help if needed, and I think we'll try and be on top of it. So thanks to all of our departments that help with that. I'm through.
All right. Next, for council business, first we have an update from the planning commission. Jeannie?
Yep. The apartment complex that is being proposed on 4th North, just east of 6th East, was continued again. There's some issues with finding enough parking for the proposed number of apartments. There is a rezone that will come to us eventually, so I won't talk too much about that. There was a church, Iglesia de Dios Peniel.
Peniel.
That was approved. It will be a new 5,000 square foot church building on a 1.47 acre parcel about approximately 673 River Parkway. So that was pretty exciting for everyone. And then there were 2 land development code amendments that we will see in workshop.
Thank
And if
you.
anybody wants to go this Thursday, I can't go. So,
Thank you. Next, we have a discussion, kind of like a second chapter to the anti-Adeline ordinance discussion that we had, I think it was a month ago, right? I understand there have been some updates to the state law that was initially part of this, that changed the number of warning tickets.
Yes, so our current code requires that we give at least three warnings before we can issue a citation. State code was amended in 2019, and that just requires one warning be issued before a citation can be issued. So that is the one change that can be looked at by the council if you would like to.
So this discussion is kind of to get an idea of where the council feels we should go. If we make a decision, then we could prepare something, correct?
Yeah, the council would like to see an ordinance and then have that discussion down the road at a future council meeting.
All right, so
Do we have any data on people that are continuously being warned but not cited?
would you like to?
Sure.
Yeah. Or is it most people are pretty compliant once we give them a warning?
Not necessarily, and the only similarity that I think I have right now for you is the seatbelt law. It did require a warning. We do have the ability to track it through our scoring system, so officers can make that initial contact, provide the warning, and then they would have the ability to look back on it to make their further decisions. But as far as seatbelts are concerned, we still see a lot of seatbelt non-use that has been warned and then, of course, cited later on. So is that what you're asking me?
I just wondered how many offenses we usually, do we have to say people that are just sitting there idling all the time, or is it just?
I think we're all guilty of it to some degree, but hopefully this will help us figure out that may not be our best avenue.
Okay.
Any thoughts, Jeannie or Tom or Amy?
I guess the thing that comes into my head is how do we have a measurement or some type of calibration as to if idling were dropped by 50%, how would that affect the air? I mean, how critical is it? I know that it's, when we idle, we are distributing carbon monoxide, and that's not good. The question is that a 0.5% or is that a 20%?
I don't think we know that, and as you know, I mean, vehicles put out different amounts, and part of what helped us get out of the EPA non-attainment area was the county implemented an emissions testing program. I mean, older cars put out more emissions than the newer cars, and we knew as the fleet just naturally modernizes over the years, that does help the situation now. So the county had a program where I think they, you know, if there was a vehicle that was really bad and was going to be really expensive to fix, they have the option to kind of do a buyout. So again, trying to get some of the worst vehicles off the road, but I don't, there's no data that I'm aware of that, because again, there's so much variation between cars and, you know, how do you know? I mean,
And I would assume that the reduction of emissions will be there, but as the population grows, I mean, the total amount, I don't know how much has changed, right?
yeah, even though cars get cleaner, and they are doing, you know, every generation of cars gets cleaner, if there's more cars, then there's simply more emissions again.
Well, do we have any role or responsibility? I mean, I would honestly tell you that there hasn't been a food service establishment approved by the Planning Commission in human memory that didn't include a drive-through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether we're adding to the problem by allowing that many drive-throughs, or if we just push them to another community because we didn't approve them.
Well, and if you recall, that's what actually kicked off the state legislature creating a state law that precluded Salt Lake City's law, because Salt Lake City tried to ban drive-throughs because of air quality issues.
Right.
But, you know, we currently are considering in our Town Center 1 area, you know, not allowing drive-throughs. Again, that's just a 5-block area. It's not citywide, but just, you know, to try and promote a more walkable downtown.
Right.
So that will be coming to council by and by as you consider proposed changes to the land development code, but that's not citywide. Again, as you know from our discussion before, I mean, there are only certain areas that the police can offer citations.
Correct.
They can't do it on private property. They can do it on private property if it's like a public parking lot, but
Yeah, they can't do it where you are sitting in your driveway for
Correct.
22 minutes while you know, have breakfast and warm your
Precisely.
car up.
Respond to emails.
Yeah.
Amy, was there something you wanted to say?
Yeah, my thought is, I mean, sometimes we make decisions that are just more to continue to educate and promote things. And so to me, whatever we can do to educate and promote, including allowing 1 warning versus 3 is a good thing.
Jeremy, can we turn the volume up on the phone so we can hear Amy a little better?
Because your last 3 words just faded away.
We had a hard time hearing that comment, Amy, sorry.
So you actually want to hear me?
Yes, we do.
What did she say?
Do you really want to hear me?
Oh.
Mark has better hearing than the rest of us.
Okay, so what did she say, Mark?
She said you really want to hear me.
Yeah. She said she thinks we should do more education, is the general.
Well, the last time we met, it was about education.
What I was saying was I think that even a change in the ordinance to move it to 1 warning is part of that process of educating people.
So if I heard you correctly, you're saying reducing the number of possible warning tickets to 1 would be part of that education effort.
Yes.
So that's the direction where, again, as we had a conversation and did additional research to learn the code had changed, we wanted to come back to council and say, would you like to direct us to draft an amendment to our current ordinance that would change that? That wasn't an option when we initiated the original ordinance, but that is now an option, and to still be in compliance with state code.
And I actually do agree with Amy in saying that this would be potentially part of our effort to educate our citizens that we have an ordinance about anti-idling. And so, how do you guys feel about it?
I think it would be appropriate to modify our ordinance to comply with the state changes. And I also think it would be appropriate for us to have maybe a little bit longer conversation as we go through the public hearing in that ordinance, and maybe ask a few people to come and talk to the power of not idling.
Good suggestion. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, we will work on drafting language for that.
You don't need a motion or?
No.
No.
I'd be supportive of that too. I just like to see how much of a difference, but I don't know, it's really hard to measure that, I suppose. I just don't want to do a draconian thing if it's going to have a minuscule effect.
Well, just telling people that not idle is not too draconian.
Well, I know, but I mean, having a warning is good. Having no warnings, that would be more draconian.
It would be.
All
It
right.
would be a fundraising measure or something.
Yeah. Put that in.
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Thank you, Amy. I think we're good to move on to our action items. Our first one, it's an item that got continued in our last meeting. It's a public hearing for a code amendment or ordinance 23-03. Mike, would you give us a refresher memory on this one?
Sure. This is an amendment to the Logan Municipal Code 1527. It's an update of our flood damage prevention ordinance. So this took a little bit of time. We had to work it through our state representative who deals with floodplain management through FEMA. We met with them a couple of times to get it right. Our existing regulations were outdated, so that was part of the process, was to bring it up to current standards. But really, the gist of these changes that are relevant to us is that we increase the building requirements to build above your base flood elevation to 2 feet as opposed to 1 feet. And I'll show you a little diagram on that. References our updated flood insurance study, restrict critical facilities from being located in special flood hazard areas, so schools, hospitals, police, fire, things like that. Don't build in a floodplain. Require a lot more information at the time of application for projects and subdivisions. Modify the variance and appeals process to match our current appeals process in our land development code. Updated our shallow area flooding construction standards and updated definitions. So this is really the gist of what's relevant to a lot of people, is changing how high you have to build your house above an established floodplain or flood level. And so the current standard, generally nationwide, is one foot above that base flood elevation. We're proposing to go to 2 feet, just add an extra foot of freeboard just in case. And FEMA was good with that, and the state was good with that. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much what we're doing. So happy to answer questions.
So Mike, are all waterways subject to these ordinances?
Anything that's defined as a floodway or a floodplain through our mapping system. So we have maps that look like this, or these are the older ones. So anything that's been identified as a flood hazard area would be under this jurisdiction. And
Okay.
most of our waterways in the city have been identified delineated.
So I'm just I was specifically wondering about the Little Logan River that is out west of town. Is that defined?
Darren, do you know?
No, it's defined, but there's,
Would these ordinances apply to that specific waterway?
excuse me, I don't want to speak from the very back, but
I don't blame
Oh,
you. We prefer to have you up at the microphone, and everybody can see you that way.
there you go. So there
Just
is
introduce
some,
yourself maybe so everyone knows.
for the record, Darren Farr, city engineer, Logan City. So there is some information there. The Little Logan River, because of where it's located, not in a highly developed area, it doesn't have all the study and detail that we have, especially here in the Blacksmith Fork, Logan River confluence area. So this area is more detailed study. We have more information. That area is less studied. So what our standards would require is that if a development came in to that area, we'd require them to go through the effort of studying that river and determining what that base flood elevation is before they developed.
Okay.
Contingent on how big that property is. If it's just one lot, then we have some allowances, that they don't have to go do that detailed engineering. But if it's a subdivision or a large commercial area, we would have it.
So the property that is currently being looked at for development on 10th West banks against the Logan River and the Little Logan River, but they've already brought some project plans forward. Would they be affected by this ordinance?
I believe they have standing with our current ordinance, and so they would be able to follow that current ordinance and wouldn't have to build to this ordinance the way that the Utah law works in terms of standing and submitting a development plan.
So okay.
That being said, they have been required to do a detailed engineering study to determine their base flood elevation. And they're currently working through that with FEMA. They do a preliminary plan that gets approved by FEMA. They build it, and then they verify through survey that that plan was actually built to the actual specifications. And that gets certified by FEMA, and then they're designated as being out of the floodplain.
Okay. I guess I'm just concerned that we don't get houses too close to the riverbank, even on the Little Logan River, because it's probably going to be just as crazy as the rest of them. And they probably it has potential to flood as well. So I've just, yeah.
And they will be meeting our current standard, which is 1 foot above. They won't be meeting this. It won't be required. I won't say that they won't be meeting it. They just won't be required. I'm sure that they'll be. 1 foot may be the minimum lot, but the grades will hopefully be above that.
Are the setbacks different now?
Yeah, they are. So that project is what triggered this whole evaluation and additional regulation.
Because the setbacks were significantly smaller, correct?
Setbacks for wetlands or for floodplains or for riparian areas, all the above.
All of the above.
Yeah, so they've been enhanced, what they were.
Okay, thank you.
And just for clarification, people can build in a floodplain, but this defines how they build in a floodplain. Correct? I mean, they have to be 2 feet above this certain measurement. Is it 100 year or 500 year?
100.
100 year. Okay, and the measurement is not laterally from a riverway, it's the vertical dimension.
You are correct.
But the goal of the regulations, though, is to preclude or move them out of the floodplain. Try to get them built outside of the floodplain if possible.
Yeah.
Right.
Are we having, maybe you said this already, but there's floodplains up in the Sumac area, and I've heard through the years that they're being redone because they come through houses and schools and other things that are in that area. So is that being revised, or is that already set?
There is a design that's being worked on, and it's part of the Crockett diversion relocation. And I don't know if you've heard of that project, but there's a project to relocate that Crockett diversion and to pressurize a lot of the irrigation systems throughout Logan City. Once that diversion gets relocated, we could take that out, and that causes, along with some of our bridges, Center Street and First North, I believe, those cause some backups in the river that end up creating this overflow that goes into the homes up by Sumac. So as we are able to get rid of that diversion, and as we do upgrades to those bridges, which we have that in our CIP to do in the next 3 to 5 years, we expect, and in fact, I had this conversation with Lance Hauser recently, we expect to be able to create a situation where that floodplain is eliminated through that area.
So because there's some pressure or resistance to the flow of water down here, it gives some backup. Okay.
Yep.
But just to be clear, the proposal for the Crockett diversion and that, it is simply, it's in the EIS
Good.
phase right now, which simply studies the options, and then at the end of that study, they come back with a preferred alternative. So that there is nothing specific that's been decided on right now. It's still in the study phase.
Well, they just started a new, the environmental assessment. They did one assessment, now they've got to do a bigger one because of the size of the potential project.
Yeah, I think that they've been going back and forth on how big this project is, how much funding is available. That's how I understand it. The project's now grown, and so now that EIS has to get a little bit bigger.
Right. So it will take, it's a year-long process, I believe, at least. So
Initially started out as a year, but has that expanded, is it 2? Paul's over there saying 2.
Mayor, do we
Paul,
have,
did I miss, do you have any clarifications on what I said about the,
No, you spoke correctly. You only went there and said when that's built, I'd say if that's built,
yeah,
due to the EIS that's
true.
happening.
yeah, and the cost and
Yeah, and
everything else, so.
the original impact assessment wasn't completed. It was the fact that the NRCS put a lot more money in the pot, so they said, stop what you're doing, do an EIS instead.
okay.
And so that's,
Of the
it's a
EIS.
2-year study,
Okay.
they're almost a year into it.
Paul or the mayor, do we have, as a city council, any say in the determination on this choice of the 3 options or so? Do we have any say in it?
Well, if they ask us for funding, we
I was
do.
going to say there's several ways is that they have a lot of public comment period and opportunity.
There's public comment period.
Well, I know, but at some point, I've weighed in on it. Sure.
You've been kind of council representative in those meetings, so that has a voice. And then lastly, at some point, they're going to need money and participating partners. Yeah.
So
And you
that's-
have all the say in that.
that can be a heck no if we want it.
It could be that we're not participating.
You don't, but you don't even know what the options are.
I'm saying at the time.
I mean, maybe they came up with a really interesting idea that's,
Yeah.
could solve a
Or
lot
maybe
of.
they come up with, nothing is really gonna work, or maybe they wanna divert out west or something else.
Right.
So
Correct.
there are many alternatives that are being discussed.
And
none-
we don't know what they are.
No, we don't.
I get that. It's going to go out to Washington or Philadelphia, wherever it is, and they're going to say, I think we like C.
No,
That's not how it works.
no.
Yeah, the only thing the NRCS is doing is providing funding for the study right now. That's as far as it really has gone, as far as their participation. Once the EIS is done, there's a recommended alternative, then you actually would apply for construction funding as a part of that. And it would be funded separately with a match from whichever entities are partners in that project.
But the recommended alternative doesn't come until there's been public input,
Correct.
so. It's a very long.
And there already has been quite a bit of public input, which my understanding is they do kind of roll into the next
Yes,
phase.
absolutely.
another
We keep track of all
public
that.
Right, there will be additional options.
That's
for
part of
public.
what I was getting at.
Okay.
Did we complete our public input, or do we still have?
Oh, no.
There's still public comment period.
Thank you.
That's why they stopped it where they did.
Yeah.
So they have to redo those portions.
All right, let's get back to,
I think there's a something.
Circle back, yeah.
yes. Where were we at?
So you need to open up public comment.
Yep.
Okay, so this is an action item for tonight. If you are here to comment on this specific item on the agenda, please come up to the mic and state your name your place of residence, and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Dr. Darrell Yellis. I live in Logan, 100 East. I'd really like to see that change course from 1 foot to 2 feet. I think it would help a lot because we have the Little Logan River, or what some people deem as canals, through Merlin Olsen Central Park and through Northwoods Gardens. Those are all near residences. They are all near there. Most of the others that are coming from the east, I understand much of it is going to go north for that Crockett study. But I think we need to make sure that, that we need to make sure that the people who live near these places, even if they're parks, I know that I've had neighbors in the past who have been having problems. Way in the past, when there were when there was more snow to cause flooding. And I really think this would be very helpful to make sure that people aren't going to build so close. I think it might even help with the study in that you don't want to see the piping so far down that it will preclude the wastewater that might come from rain and snow. So I think this is a very good idea to make sure that we have some flood damage prevention, that at least we're making an effort to slow down the times that we have flooding. I know you just mentioned that earlier about the flooding. I think this is a good way of doing it. I went through a lot of that coding until I got to the point where I couldn't see anymore, and it made sense. So I just wanted you to know that I'm always worried about the people and how it's going to affect people. And in this case, it might affect people for the better, because it is going to help them not build in a place that is, or build in a way that would make them subject to a higher level of flooding.
Thank you, Dr. Yost. Looks like we can bring it back to the council.
I'd like to move acceptance of ordinance 2303. I think it's good engineering, good thoughts, and appreciate the writing that's been done.
I would second that.
It's been moved and seconded. I'll take a roll vote. Amy?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Jeannie?
Aye.
Ernesto, aye. Is that how we say it? Ernesto, aye?
Yes.
E-I-E-I-O.
All right, ordinance 23-03 passes. Next, we have a public hearing for another code amendment, ordinance 23-08, as well by Mike.
Okay, just real briefly, this has got two elements to it. We modified the historic district overlay to match the language in the historic district guidelines. There was some disconnect there. And then we added standards for murals in the historic district, basically prohibit them on street-facing facades, permit them on plain sides, rear alley walls, don't exceed 75% of the wall area, don't put them on unpainted brick surfaces, don't put them on fences, don't obstruct architectural features, and no lighting. And then we modified the sign code just to do some cleanup, and we also took out murals and wall art as a regulated sign unless they contain commercial messaging. We changed the sign setback from 0 feet to 18 inches. So other than that, happy to answer questions.
So Mike, here's my question.
Okay.
The mural that is painted on the building that is on Center Street, but the side of the building faces Main Street by the Center Street Grill, if they were to repaint that, would it be allowed?
Yeah, that one, they need to peel off the vinyl.
Yeah, it's actually not painted on. It's
Yeah.
Okay, but would it be allowed since it is street facing?
That's a good question. I don't know. Good question.
Okay.
Is it
Just
diff-
curious.
Is it different? I don't know if your question is strictly painted or another vinyl covering.
No, I just mean, is a mural allowed?
Yeah.
Because the mural is prohibited on a street facing facade.
It's not the facade though, it is the side of the building,
Yeah.
so I think it complies with the law, so.
Yeah.
Even though it's street facing, it's not.
It is a facade of the building.
It's a side facade. I think in that case, we'd probably be okay with it. What we're trying to avoid is painting the front of the building that faces out. That one's kind of weird because there used to be a building next to it, the old church
Yeah,
on that corner,
years ago.
years and years ago, right? That's a good question. I mean, I would say, yeah, we probably would allow it, because I think the interpretation is we're trying to get at just the front of the building that faces out on the street, but I could be wrong in that interpretation.
Okay, I was just curious.
I mean, what do you all think?
Well, I was wondering whether we needed to put any kind, I mean, the potential exists that someday Center Street Grill will go away and something big will go in that corner, on that corner. Then you don't have an issue at all because there's no street-facing
Right.
building facade that would face Main Street. But in the interim, perhaps we need to put something in there about amount of space back from Main Street or something like, back from a street facade. I don't know. It's the only thing I could think of. So, I would,
Yeah, that would be, it's a good point.
Yeah.
If you said ever facing a street, every mural somehow faces a street.
Right.
I mean, it might be a great distance. So I would support what I guess you were saying. It's not the front street facade.
yeah, but the definition of facade is just a side.
No, I understand that.
So I'm just saying.
I'm just saying, if you eliminated any facade that had any facing toward any street, you wouldn't have any opportunity.
So you're saying adding
No,
defining?
I'm supportive. Well, I guess you want to clarify if that's fine.
Yeah, so the way the language is written here, it says murals are prohibited on the primary street-facing facade of the building.
That's clear.
So again, the intent is that front of the building, we don't want to see a mural on, but I think in this case, where it's a side and it's set back, and to your point, if they do build a building, then it's really a good point, because then it will be covered up anyways.
Yeah.
So from our perspective, we would allow that to happen.
Okay. Just, that was all I was asking.
I had to kind of catch up.
It's a good question.
I just want you to, I don't want you to think this is a slam dunk.
I know.
And I think murals do have a place in our urban environment. They just shouldn't be the street facade.
And the tricky part is we as a government can't regulate the expression of free speech, and that's why we're trying to define the parameters on where they could go, but not require a permit or require some oversight of, well, whether your mural is good or bad. It's go forth and conquer, but still do it within kind of a set of boundaries.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, if they're
Anyway,
done that.
Any other comments before we open it up for public comment? This is a public hearing. If you'd like to comment on this specific item of the agenda, please come up to the mic and state your name and your place of residence, and keep your comments to 3 minutes with us.
don't all rush up at once.
There you go.
All right. Bring it back to the council.
I'll move we approve ordinance 23-08.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We'll do a roll call vote again. Amy?
Yes.
Tom?
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Jeannie?
Aye.
Ernesto, aye. Ordinance 23-08 passes. Next on our agenda, thank you, Mike.
Amy's phone's ringing.
Next on our agenda, we have another public hearing for resolution 23-05. It's a budget adjustment presented by Richard. Rich?
We have one item to consider, a grant for design services for $65,466. This is for bank stabilization near the USU Water Lab on the Logan River.
It's near where?
It's near the USU Water Lab.
Just east
Oh,
of the
that's
water lab.
where the, yeah.
That's where the bank stabilization will look at.
Not a,
Design
it's
services.
not a federal bank, it's just.
A riverbank.
We do need some federal banks.
This week.
That was a joke, Chief.
Any other comments before we open it up?
Nope.
This is a public hearing. If you'd like to comment on this specific item on the agenda, please come up to the mic and state your name and your place of residence. All right, bring it back to the council.
I'll move we approve resolution 23-05.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call vote. Amy,
Yes.
are you sure, Amy?
I'm 100% positive.
Great. Tom?
Yeah.
Mark?
Aye.
Jeannie?
Aye.
Ernesto, aye. Resolution 23-05 passes. That is it for our action items tonight. Next, we have workshop items. First up, we have resolution 23-07, presented by our Director of Parks and Recreation.
Russ, I can't believe you got to go first this time. That was very nice.
You're always last.
He's always last.
I owe somebody a favor. Council, thank you for hearing this proposal tonight. This is an ongoing effort. You've probably heard this introduction a couple of times as we've been before you, probably in the last 12 months. There's, at last count, 419 services that are fee-based. That makes up about half of what the department does. And so as we continue to address these fees as we go along here, you'll see what you have tonight are 5 of those. One is in our adult programming. That's adult basketball. That's mainly a fall program. And then we also have a youth track and field program called Logan Flyers. That program will take place later this summer. And then we have 3 special event fees in different variations there. 2 of those involving electricity, and the other is arts and craft booth without electricity. Most of these events, special event fees, are related to Pioneer Day, which we do annually at Willow Park. What we've noticed over the last few years is that the vendor equipment, that which they use to bring on site, so this is all mobile, is getting bigger. And as they do, their need for electricity, those that need to plug in, their demand is greater because they're trying to
do what they do with what they have, and we've noticed that there's been greater demand for that over the last couple of years. We anticipate that that's not going to change. They're able to be a little more efficient because they've got bigger rigs to work from, but their demand for electricity doesn't go away either. So part of our proposal in this package is addressing that, both for vendors that may rely on power for, generally it's food-related concessions, but we also have other craft vendors that rely on power as well.
So Russ, could I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So right now, I'm going to say that you figure that the electrical component is half of what the fee is? A quarter of the fee?
It's less than half. The majority of the fees that we're looking at from the time we started has been primarily impacting our labor. At the beginning of last year, even, well, almost 2 years ago, we were having to address our wages, and I'm talking about our seasonal and part-time wages,
Right.
In order to fill our slots. And most of our services, or in fact, all the services that involve paid labor, we're seeing an impact now in terms of what we're having to pay to stay competitive with the market. So to answer your question, I think most of what we are looking at falls back on the labor to produce or to provide services.
Okay, because I know that electrical costs have been much higher than they've been in the past, and I just don't want us to be in a position where we're not charging enough to compensate for the electricity that's being used.
Sure.
So that's all.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So one of the things that we typically do when we bring these fees before you is we give our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board the opportunity to see that. They will not see this until Thursday. So just kind of a footnote for you. They would have seen it last Thursday, but we have some staff down at our state conference last week. And for that reason, their board meeting was pushed to this Thursday. So what you're seeing tonight, they will review on Thursday, and then I'll report back on that should you have this move forward in 2 weeks.
So I don't know if you mentioned this earlier, but it seems like it's a range between 10 to up to 15, 20% of an increase in these fees.
There is, yeah.
We're a lot cheaper than Weaver County.
Yeah, much less expensive. That's what I was thinking too.
But I would definitely, talk to them about that whole electrical component, because I think it's going to be a big deal. I'm worried that it's going to be a big deal.
And I think there's more to come with that.
Yes. Yeah. I'm curious how we ended up with $189 as the fee before, but I don't need to know.
So Russ, do you think your board will have any concerns with the proposed fees, or is that?
Amy, they may have concerns. We will bring it to them on Thursday. I'm not sure how with that, I would report that if in 2 weeks the council wants me to address this proposal at that time. But I don't know what their concerns, if there are any, will be until Thursday.
Some more questions?
Not from me.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Russ.
Russ.
Yeah, I mean, I'll report back.
Next on our agenda, Mike is back.
It's two big paragraphs to talk about.
Another code amendment, ordinance 23-09.
Okay, workshop on ordinance 2309. This has got a lot of moving parts in it, really not that complex. So we've modified or amended 1707, 08, and 10. The changes in 1707, those are our residential development standards. We call them our spec sheets. Really what we did was modify the requirements for open space, landscaping, usable outdoor space, just to match what we did just last time we met, where we changed the nomenclature on that. Adjusted the maximum height of an accessory building from 15 to 20 feet. If you want to build a detached garage in the back, your maximum height now is 20 feet as opposed to 15 feet. Added a 25% transparency for front facades in the MR zones. Those are multifamily zones. And then in the MR12 zone, we do see some single family occasionally. Added a minimum lot width of 40 feet and minimum lot size of 4,000 square feet for a detached single family dwelling. And then in our neighborhood center zone, we added standards for parking, no drive-throughs, transparency, landscaping, usable outdoor space. And this was based on the project that we saw down by the fairgrounds, where you didn't really have standards in the neighborhood center zone. In 1708, this is our list of residential uses or use types. And in the NC zone, we didn't really have anything. So now we've changed it to allow for single-family dwellings. And then if you want to do multifamily, requires a conditional use permit. And then the 1710 is our commercial development standards, or our commercial spec sheets. We updated all those to match the open space landscaping language. And then we did make some changes in Town Center 1. The proposal is to require a minimum building height of 27.5 feet on all street frontages in TC1. And TC1 extends from 5th north to 2nd south. And it goes in about a block and a half, depending on where you're at. We proposed a minimum number of building stories or floors is 2. So we have a 2-story building along the street frontage. Increase the transparency requirements on all sides of the building. Emphasize building design, spelled out. You've got to have foresight architecture. You've got to have pedestrian entrance onto the street. Any kind of accessory architectural feature we saw in one of the recent projects wouldn't count as your building mass or building design. So we're trying to get away from that. And then we proposed no drive-through lanes in Town Center 1. We've also got two elements of parking in there, correct parking reduction. For lots fronting on Main or 4th North, we'll give you a 50% parking reduction for your commercial uses if you submit an alternative parking plan, and then you limit your uses to sales and service categories of uses. So the idea is if you're going to put in a restaurant or some kind of small store retail use, we'll give you a parking bonus. And the goal is to try to have people utilize the public parking lots, but also push us towards having less asphalt and more building downtown. And then the second alternative for parking is 100% commercial parking reduction for lots fronting Main or 4th. Again, you limit those sales and service category of uses. Alternative parking plan, at least 50% of the lots covered with the building, and then at least 25% of the lots covered with usable outdoor space. And then any kind of change in use triggers parking compliance. So put that in there at the end. And then other than that.
So, but they're complemented, the at least 50% of lot is covered with a building is complemented with certain setbacks.
Right.
And other requirements that have to, so they can't stick the 50% of the building in the middle.
No, in the Town Center 1, you've got to put the building up along the street. Right. It's got a minimum and maximum setback. Basically, it's a 0 to 5 feet, so the building's right up there. You've got to have 75 feet of that frontage in building. And then this is saying at least half your lot's covered in building, and the other 25% is usable outdoor space.
So how does that just, here I go again. 4th North and Main.
Mm-hmm.
So would 75% of both frontages have to be building?
Yeah, the way it's written, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just checking.
So a good example is the hotel just on our block. When you look at the way this is calculated out for building frontage, on this south frontage facing Second North, it's got a 93% frontage ratio, basically. So almost the entire frontage of that property is building. On the Main Street side, it's just a little under 69%, it's a little under 7%. And that's what we're trying to see downtown, is promote building space along the street frontage. Now, if you're going after the parking reduction, if you did some usable outdoor spaces, some patios, park area, just areas that people can gather and congregate, then will allow you to reduce your parking. Really what we're saying is the market's going to drive itself, because if you're putting in a hotel, they have minimum standards they have to meet within their chain to park their customers. So we can say, don't park it, but they're going to say, wait a sec, Hilton's telling me I've got to put in these many stalls. Or if you're building a Trader Joe's or whatever, they're going to tell you what they're going to require from their industry. But what we're saying is we're going to give you the flexibility to design a project that doesn't necessarily require parking. So, that makes sense?
So if the property that is just on 4th North, east of the empty lot, ever redevelops, that big, where the Sprint and all that stuff is, that would have to, so if they were to redevelop that area, they'd have to pull all the buildings to the street frontage, correct? And park behind.
Yeah, if they scrape that site clean, then
Right.
what they're constructing is out here on the street.
Okay. All right, I'm just, thinking it through.
And so I just put this together because I'm so high-tech with my graphics. But these kind of show you that, when you look at Main Street from about 5th North going south, the amount of building mass that's out on the streetscape. And they not be the best looking buildings, but at least you've got some kind of building out there that provides that interface with pedestrians. So there actually are quite a few as you work your way down. Even our library right here is built out on Main. You've got the hotel, the bulk of this block, and then obviously the older part of town, everything's built out on in the old historic way. Whoops. And then as you go south, same thing. But the idea is not to replicate old, but the idea is to get buildings on the street, a lot of glass, some kind of pedestrian orientation, pedestrian entryway to get people out there walking as opposed to driving. And that's where the pushback to the drive-throughs was when you put a drive-through between a building and a street, you don't create that sense of place, you just create that sense of convenience for a customer. And not to say that a drive-through is bad, but it just may not be the most appropriate thing in downtown Logan.
So In-N-Out Burger would not be legal under this?
Well, I think it still would be. What we're trying to get away from is, let's see where I can get to it.
Except for no drive-through.
Yeah, exactly, no drive-throughs.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
referring to.
Correct. But the architectural elements of that building, the way we got there was we had them pull parts of that building out to the street because we had a zero setback.
Yeah.
But the drive-through component wouldn't be.
It's good to have that there. It would have been nicer to have a 2 or 3 story building, bigger
Yeah.
mass on that.
Well, what's interesting is this used to be the WAMU building. I don't know what it is now. It's where the attorneys are on the southwest corner of that intersection. The bank, bank and attorney's office. They actually have a drive-through that goes through the building or kind of
Under the building, yeah.
under the building, yeah. So, and it was asked the planning commission, well, how many drive-throughs are there in downtown? There's probably, what we say, 5, 6, or 7-ish, 7 that are existing, generally banks, and a couple drive-throughs for restaurants. So.
Tom, you clearly haven't had a double hand style.
Oh, my God.
But can you eat that? Can you eat that while you drive?
No, somebody would take me.
Go time.
Kimber retired just too early. He was hardly waiting for the In-N-Out Burger.
Mike, were there,
Rich and Kimber.
are there any public comments? I guess this.
No, this is only a workshop.
No, we did get
Planning commission.
We did get a.
Planning commission.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we received a comment from a commercial broker who's got an interest in a property on the south end of that town center, who's opposed to these kinds of standards. So we felt that it was not draconian, but too hard to lure in the appropriate tenant. But they're obviously looking at it from the perspective of, I want to attract somebody to make money. And looking at it from the other side of it, we want to make sure that whatever you attract is tasteful and looks good on the street. I think you've got those comments, if not, I'll forward them to you.
Other than that, there was not a single comment.
Correct.
He wasn't, that individual didn't come to planning commission either.
He wasn't present, he emailed it in.
Yeah.
And it was unanimous vote from the commission too.
That's correct.
Any other comments? Questions?
Amy, you have any questions?
My only question was about the letter that we had received, which Mike just addressed.
Can you repeat that?
My only question was about the letter that we received from the developer on the south end, and Mike addressed that.
Thank you. All right. Our next item is ordinance 23-10, other code amendment from Mike.
23 dash.
Yeah, 23-10. So
It says 17 up
I
there.
know, I didn't change the PC number.
I was like, oh.
The two numbering systems, and
Okay, we're good.
a little dyslexic here. So this is really, these changes are pretty simple, updated 13, 14, 15, and 62. They all deal with the public zones. What we did was modified 1713 to add intent or purpose language to allow for broadness applicability to include nonprofits. And then in 1714, we added behavioral and mental health receiving centers, homeless resource centers, homeless shelters, and religious institutions, CUPs, or conditional uses in the use table. And then in 1715, we added a proximity standard of 300 feet from a community location for those types of uses. And then we added definitions in 1716 for those. And really what this is getting at is when you look at our current code, it's really unclear as to whether or not I could put in a homeless shelter or a homeless resource center just in one of the zones, whether it's defined as a community type of resource or not. And so we thought this is an approach to allow for public participation as well as a legislative decision that allows you guys to make a decision on whether or not that type of use is appropriate in a specific location. So really it forces somebody to come to ask for a zone change to get to what they want to. And then this is what it looks like when we look at a proximity map. So this is a park down 2nd North, 5th West. And the idea is we use the alcohol regulation, those standards, and just said, okay, let's go out 300 feet, draw a box around it, and then everything outside of that would be appropriate. Not to say that this is the location, this is just an example of what, applying that 300-foot proximity standard to like a public park. Okay, any questions on that?
I would like to point out that a warming center has a different designation. Could you clarify that, Mike?
Yeah, so the definition of community service, we kept a warming center in that definition, so that would be basically allowed to where it's at now or in other locations in the city. We kept it, it's really, it's a step below a homeless shelter or a homeless resource center, and didn't feel like it warranted the need to go to that next level of scrutiny.
Any other questions? Questions, Jeannie?
Nope.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
Next on our agenda is a rezone ordinance 23-11 presented by our planner, Buzz Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Some of you were either on council or commission in 2016, and you may remember Jed Willits. He's back for another rezone. It's the same property. Let me give a quick recap. So it's the corner of 2nd West and 1400 North. It's Lot 6 of Royal Point subdivision. The current zoning is MR12. The future land use plan designates that area as MR. It does not designate a number in the future land use plan. It just says multifamily, and that's what MR essentially means. Again, current is MR12. There's some NR6 to the south. There's some commercial and commercial services to the north. This is the proposal to go to MR20. This is the site here. Lot 6 has 7 fourplexes that were built in the 1990s. You can see here, this is the city-approved Royal Point subdivision, approved back in 1992 when this area was first developed. This is Lot 6 since that time.
They didn't build it the way they put it. Didn't come in lines, did it? In a line.
No. The developer, the builder, would build a fourplex and then go to the county and subdivide it illegally, and then build another fourplex, subdivide it, and so on and so forth. Our zone at the time didn't require individual lots, so we recognized it as 7 fourplexes on one big, almost 2-acre lot. So that occurred between 1992 and 1995. Those 7 fourplexes were built. And at that time, the R4 zone would have allowed 8 fourplexes total on that site. For whatever reason, they never built the 8. And in 2000, the entire Bridger neighborhood was downzoned, and we adopted new nomenclature in 2000 as well. MFH was introduced. MFH was then changed to MR12 with the new ordinance in 2011. And MR12 and MRH are pretty similar. The density, though, is much lower, so that would allow 21 units on that 1.8 acre lot number 6. So those 7 fourplexes are considered grandfathered. When you downzone below what's built, they become legally existing non-conforming or grandfathered. The applicant purchased the property without due diligence, title reports. The illegal subdivision wasn't caught until later. It did come to the city. There was some misinformation given. But in 2011, the only remedy there was, hey, let's upzone it so we can develop this 1/4 acre of leftover space. As you can see,
What
they
year
built.
was it? What year was that?
2011.
2011. Okay.
This is the current condition of the site, and this is the area that Jed Willits purchased in 2011. So they developed a parking lot and an area for this, but they never developed that. He was always under the impression that he could build a duplex there because he had a 1/4 acre and the zoning's MR12. The problem is the city doesn't recognize the 1/4 acre. The city recognizes the 1.8 or the almost 2. So this is what we recognize. We don't recognize that little thing. And so when you factor that in, this area is actually over-densified. Does that make sense? So in 2011, he came to the city council and asked for a rezone to try to remedy his problem. And council said, under the direction of Kimber Housing, said, let's explore maybe some options through maybe property trades or some other things. We had some surplus properties. And so Kimber worked with Jed for a number of years, and none of the properties actually worked out. So ultimately they said, let's go back in 2016 and approach the council again. So in 2016, the city council did upzone the property to MR20. and Jed Willits got his design review permit for his duplex. He had to get some signatures from all 6 people, and that took a while. It took until 2018 to get those. And then in 2018, he applied for a building permit, and his drawings were incomplete. He went back and forth with Paul Taylor in our building department for 2 years. Jed did have a family emergency or issue that severely delayed him. He also indicated that his profession as a UPS truck driver was severely impacted by COVID, as his work hours went up significantly. Because in 2020, Paul Taylor basically said, you have to get this done, or I'm gonna have to expire the building permit. Jed actually had finished all his drawings and completed all the red lines, but he never actually came in and picked up his building permit in 2020.
And when was COVID? 2021?
Which phase?
You were on the
Started in 2020.
So usually how long do permits are good for? Usually
2 years.
2 years.
That's with an extension. So a permit's usually good for 1 year. You can get an extension for 2. In this case, he got a 4-year extension because he was working between a design review permit for 2 years and then a building permit for the other 2 years. Now we're going on 3 years from that date. It was May 2020 was Paul Taylor's final deadline. And now he's applying for a rezone. He applied originally 2 months ago, and he thought, hey, I'm gonna go for a 4-plex. And staff didn't like that position because if you upzone it to MR20 and you take a 1/4 acre, you can actually build 4 units. And he made some statements, and he filled out his application for a 4-plex. He was never, a duplex was always the product on the table. So staff recommended denial. That plus how many chances or how much time should an individual get? It was just a recommendation by staff. The Planning Commission heard this last Thursday, and they felt like Jed should get another chance, and they approved, they forwarded a recommendation of approval.
Yeah.
Their vote was 3-2, it was split pretty closely, as you can see in the minutes. So Planning Commission's recommending approval. Jed at that meeting, however, did verbally commit to a duplex. He basically said, okay, I'll go back to the original. And so you can see that in the meeting minutes and in the findings. And so at this point, it's a legislative decision in your hands. Happy to answer any questions.
Everybody's quiet.
And just so you are aware, after the 2016, it was downzoned and a subsequent citywide, rezone. And that's usually the case. Is like if a situation like this, sometimes they get upzoned, then they usually get downzoned to prevent any, further development. So it was downzoned in 2017. So it's been back to MR12 since 2017.
So he's confident that he can fit the 2-plex plus the parking, additional parking in that space.
Yeah, the parking's actually already built. The Planning Commission went over the site plan. So it's actually a duplex with a 2-car garage. The code requires 2 per unit. And then there's an additional 4 stalls out here for visitor. So he's double the parking. Here's his facade designs. One thing that has changed since 2016 is stormwater regulations. So he may have to re-engineer this a little bit to accommodate those new regulations.
There was a comment by the woman who lives directly behind that her yard gets flooded from the runoff from this piece of property.
Yes, it's this individual right here.
And, you know, I'm of two minds. One is you own a piece of property, but you own an illegal piece of a property that was never divided, and you didn't ever figure that out. So are we creating a hotter mess than is already there if we approve it? So that's, and I didn't fully understand how we were going to accommodate garbage collection and a few other things that are being done on that piece of the plat today. So those will be my concerns, because I think that we're adding to something that is already non-conforming. And is that the appropriate thing for us to do, given stormwater and all the rest of it?
Were there any comments you want to share about why the people that voted no in the commission? What were their reasonings?
Well, it's kind of rooted in the FLUP and some of the actions that we've taken in the Bridger neighborhood. We haven't done that neighborhood plan yet, but I don't think it's any surprise to anyone in this room that that particular neighborhood is oversaturated with multifamily development. The school district has been extremely vocal in that neighborhood to try to eliminate or reduce any new multifamily, to try to, you know, help, I guess, stabilize Bridger Elementary. And so those are the efforts that were made in 2000 and then again in 2011 when these downzones occurred. And then some single-family areas were also created in that Bridger area. They're developing slower than we hope, but the 1800 North Roger Jones subdivision, and then there's a subdivision near the elementary school that are both single-family that are being developed and built right now.
So I have a question. How is this not spot zoning?
It is spot zoning, but spot zoning can occur. There's no law that says you don't have to or you can't spot zone.
I don't know, Kimber would tell us that it was a bad idea.
Yeah. How big is that piece?
It's
Yes.
1.8.
Not the whole thing, but just the little piece that the city doesn't
Quarter
recognize.
acre.
Quarter acre.
Acre. So technically, you could put a single-family home on it.
Yeah, you could.
Because it's like right now, it's like it's going to be nothing or it's going to be a duplex, but maybe it could be a single-family home. But does anybody want to put a house there?
Yeah.
Behind five.
Behind 504. I mean, it's like, so do we want it to be nothing or do we want it to be something?
The current zone is nothing or open space.
Right.
As you can see, some of these others on Royal Point developed some open space areas. This one didn't. Part of the problem is there's 7 different owners here, and they kind of just do their own thing. But MR12 is no more new units. They're already over the maximum.
Yeah.
But MR20 could be a single family home. It could be a duplex, triplex, fourplex.
Yeah.
I think it stops at
Technically a
fourplex.
fourplex.
Fourplex would be the max, but yeah, 1 to 4.
So the height ability in MR20 though is 20 feet taller, correct?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part, Amy.
Height in
The
MR.
height,
Yeah, the height is up to 45 He does have a design review permit, if you look in your packet, and that was approved by the Planning Commission. And so that's a 2-story structure that's approximately 25 feet tall. So if the rezone is successful, this is what is approved to be built. Faster than 4 years this time.
Any other comments or questions?
So I guess we've given the timeline, the comment that that COVID made it so that he couldn't build it. COVID really became apparent March or April of 2020, and he lost his permit in May, and he'd had 4 years prior to that to build it. So, I don't know. But we don't make a decision tonight anyway.
That's right.
So.
And this one will be on the April 18th. It's going to skip a meeting for spring break. And the applicant is planning on being here on the 18th.
All right. Thank you, Russ. Next, our last workshop item for tonight is budget adjustments. And I saw Rich being very anxious about moving forward with it.
So we have a few items to consider. The first is a request to appropriate $40,000 of IT reserves. Our IT fund is an internal service fund that serves the city. The request is to appropriate $40,000 for data security network monitoring services. These services are included in next year's budget. However, we need to get these going this year, we hope, to preserve our security of our IT network. Next is a request to appropriate $1,000, a library grant for employee training. And then the last two are police reimbursements for overtime shifts, $14,050 and $5,016. Any questions?
Questions? Tom, I know you have a question.
I have questions, but not about this.
All right. I think that's it for tonight. Thank you, everyone that joined us. Any last considerations?
I have a question for Rich. So for the stabilization of the bank, the $65,000 we did earlier, is that going to be done before the next destabilization event, or is that for after that?
Probably during, right, Paul?
Yeah, my thought was, I wonder how that can change during a flood.
It's like, we're going to get that done before the 20th of May, which is what Paul predicted,
And
that's when the water can come.
that was just the engineering design money, so, no.
Okay.
But the design, but at least, you know.
I was very
design may be
curious
different
about that.
after.
Thank you for answering my question.
Thank you, everyone. We're adjourned.
Bye, Amy.
Hi, everyone.
Tom?